Alright, so one video that I thought would be super fun to make would be a raid tier list, and I never did that before quitting the game, but obviously I'm still covering it, and with the Desert Perpetual recently coming out, I thought now would be a really fun time to talk about all the other raids in Destiny. So let me just pull up my raid report here quickly. We're going to go in order, so we're starting with the Leviathan raid, which I did 40 clears of and 8 prestige. Prestige raids were actually really cool, and my last one, I was running it because I needed the Warlock helmet for the prestige version, because the prestige version gave different armor with like a purple hue glow. And then, so anyways, we wound up 5-manning the prestige, which felt pretty good right before the game, or before they sunset the Leviathan raid. So let's talk about it. Actually, before we do, I do want to just establish a couple ground rules. I will hit on like the armor and the weapons and maybe like the day one experience and things like that. But overall, it's just going to be my thoughts on the raid and how much I liked running them over and over. So even if they had the best loot, this is just a grading mostly for how much I liked the raid, so I just wanted to specify that. Also, let's talk about the tier rankings. So hopefully you can see that. I'm not sure why it's not in black, but basically the S tier, we have amazing, so just raids that I think are amazing and I really love running them. Great, raids that are probably still really good, but I just don't really like running them. Solid, just a decent experience, nothing wrong with it, not amazing, not terrible. Mid, just mid. Mid is the perfect way to describe it. Again, not horrible, but definitely not good. And then ass, to where, I do not like running this, and I don't think it's very good. So let's jump into it with the Leviathan. So the Leviathan was very cool because you had the Castellum, and then you could go to certain encounters in whatever order you wanted, as long as you placed the standard there. And then you could also go through the underbelly, or maybe it was on a rotation, so the rotation of the things changed. But either way, then you went to an underbelly, and then you wouldn't have to go back and clear the Castellum every time. So if you learnt the underbelly really well, then you could do really fast runs of this raid. So I thought that was very unique and novel. There were lots of different secrets and corners to find in the underbelly. It was really well fleshed out. I felt like the scale of it was awesome. S tier for scale, big and gold, and just you felt small. And something cool with Leviathan for me personally is it's actually the first raid I ever completed. I've talked about this before, but I was a casual in Destiny 1. I did jump into a couple raids with friends because they needed a 6, and that was back in the day, but for me at least, before LFGs and stuff, so I would only play that with friends. They asked me to join. Didn't know what the hell I was doing. It was actually King's Fall. We didn't beat it. I did also, I guess, technically beat Vault of Glass because I was the guy on the Solar Grenade cheese, but I didn't run all of Vault of Glass, only cheesed the boss. But so Leviathan was the very first one I ever did. It was with my friends, and it took us 24 hours. We didn't have a very good team. There was one guy on our team that was absolutely throwing constantly. We said we should have got a special emblem for carrying his ass. But anyway, they had a really cool loot pool because Midnight Coup back then could roll Outlaw Rampage. Inaugural Address was Outlaw Kill Clip, I believe, and it had high impact reserves. Conspirator, Ghost Primus, It Stared Back was excellent. Whirlwind Blade, Sins of the Past was Cluster Bomb, which was meta back then. So it was similar in D1 in that way, to where the raid just flat out gave you the best loot. And back then you could actually change the energy type. So your Conspirator, for instance, could be Arc, Void, or Solar if you chose to switch it with a weapon mod. So anyways, the loot was really good. I think the armor looks great. The Titan helmet is still one of my favorite armor pieces on Titan to this day. I love it. So I just have really fond memories of Leviathan. It's what started me watching Destiny YouTube, actually. I found a Rick Kaka's guide on how to beat the Leviathan raid because I was a total noob. and had no idea what I was doing. And yeah, just everything around it, I just loved it. It was like what got me into end game content in Destiny. Like that's where it really started. Again, on my raid report, I did 40 clears, which obviously isn't a lot, but those were all full clears. Like I never checkpoint farmed, and I was just running it because I enjoyed running it. So honestly, for me, Leviathan is actually amazing. Between the nostalgia, it being my first raid, the weapons being so good back then, still some of the armor I love rocking on my Titan to this day. Yeah, honestly, just nothing but fond memories. To talk about the encounters a bit, dogs was really cool. You had like a maze type garden, and then yeah, basically you all split up to take out the dogs. I thought that was really fun and unique. Gauntlet was really fun, lots of teamwork required, rotating. Yeah, I really liked that one. Royal Pools, I also really liked that. Those bathers were no joke back in the day. Merciless was awesome in there. One of the like very good, it was a heavy weapon at the time, but yeah, it was excellent for that. I liked the raid so much, in fact, that it's funny, I started Destiny as just a Warlock main. Like D1, I only played Warlock. So when I came to Destiny 2, I was still Warlock main at first, but then I wanted to get the armor on other characters, so I made a Hunter, I made a Titan, because I just enjoyed playing the game. There was no player retention tricks really back then. I just wanted to play more of the game, and Leviathan was a big reason for that. I wanted to get better, and by the end I did. So like I said, for me it's S tier because it was just such an enjoyable experience for me to just really grow my love for Destiny. Oh, and I guess when talking about the encounters, the final boss was Callus, and yeah, like shooting the skulls and getting transported and needing to like have the callouts for the symbols and everything. Like I said, for me, people say raids are what makes Destiny Destiny, and I agree. And so because it was my first raid, just everything about it felt so unique and just exciting. And yeah, I just really liked trying to get better at the raid. So yeah, I liked all the encounters. The loot was great. Armor was good. Scale of the raid was good. And yeah, just the fond memories. So S tier for me. So next up we have Eater of Worlds. This was a raid lair actually. So there was kind of the opening part where you just jumped on platforms and you fought a bunch of bosses. That was your first chest. Then you had another long traversal section on your way to the final boss, and then the final boss was sort of split up into two parts. So it was a very easy raid, could be done very quickly, and what I liked about it was the meta that formed on the boss. Again, I sort of talked about how I didn't play all characters actually until Eater of Worlds was out, and then I went back and like farmed Leviathan for those other gear sets. But with Eater, I just thought it was so cool how hunters could just chain tethers with Orpheus rig and then feed orbs to your other teammates who would be on Celestial Nighthawk. So yeah, it had a pretty neat meta for back then. The loot was absolutely terrible. You had Zenith of Your Kind shotgun, which, let's just take a look at it, had auto-loading holster and threat detector. And then I Am Alive had moving target auto-loading holster. Again, this was back in the day when like loot was just way different. So only 2 weapons, and then it had the beetle armor for Titan, which is like kind of a meme. So yeah, anyways, the armor was not very good. But again, it was just so early into my Destiny lifespan that I was just like, this is just fun to run. But looking at it objectively as a raid, very short, very just I think I gotta go mid if I'm being honest. I could put it to solid, but yeah, we'll see where the other ones end up. Maybe I'll wind up moving it around with the power of comparison. But just on first thought, I feel like, yeah, it's probably just a mid raid. Did I have fun with it? Absolutely, but it was nothing mind-blowing. And for the day one, I think an LFG team actually wound up winning the world's first, which is pretty crazy. And yeah, also with the prestige, let's see how many clears I did. I did 30 with 14 prestige. It used to drop the Telesto Catalyst, which was interesting. So yeah, I actually wound up having to do quite a few prestige runs of it. And yeah, like I said, I didn't hate it, but it is a pretty quick one. And to just jump back to Leviathan, I didn't mention its raid exotic was Legend of Acreus, which I also love. It's one of my favorite weapons in the game. It hits like a truck, just an absolutely iconic weapon. And the way you got it and the way you got the catalyst and stuff, just very, very cool. Yeah, Eater of Worlds didn't have a raid exotic, but like I said, later on, once they introduced Catalyst into the game, it got the Telesto Catalyst. So yeah, just an interesting raid, but not too amazing. Next is Spire of Stars, which I actually have my lowest clear count of any raid. I did 7 prestiges actually and 7 normals. So speaking of prestige, that one dropped the Sleeper Simulant Catalyst, and yeah, I love Sleeper Simulant, always have. So yeah, that got me in there. It also had the Luxurious Toast exotic emote back when you could like earn cool things in game and not have to spend money at Eververse to get the coolest stuff. So lots of people would run it strictly for that. I loved the meta on the final boss. I guess I could talk about the other encounters first. Like you had the kind of passing the balls and the opening gate and stuff to start off. Then you had a super long traversal, and then you were in the boss room. So yeah, this one was a raid lair as well. So only kind of like 3 encounters. But yeah, then you had the boss room where it kind of taught you the plate mechanics and everything. And then you would fight the boss. So this one I did with LFGs. All these early ones I did with a lot of LFGs. But yeah, Spire, I had a super good Sherpa. And yeah, he Sherpa'd 5 of us. He was the only one that really knew what to do. And yeah, we all learned it. And this was a very mechanic heavy raid. And again, to me, it was just very, very cool. The meta that wound up forming was just a bunch of Raiden Flux arc staffs to beat the hell out of the boss, which I also thought was really cool because at that point I had 3 characters. I remember really liking Sunbreaker Titan, and I would run it with Crimson because the enemies in that one were actually some of the hardest raid enemies we've ever had. I can't remember exactly like the light level and how all that worked, but it was actually a challenge to stay alive in that. Like a lot of these modern day raids, combat isn't really difficult anymore. So it was a throwback in that aspect. So I thought that was cool. The loot was a crappy sidearm called Last of the Legion, which had Zen Moment and full auto trigger system, which now everything has full auto. And Emperor's Envy, which was a fusion rifle with moving target or ambitious assassin, and Rampage. So not a terrible roll, especially for the time, but yeah, not very good loot. And then the armor set was also nothing to write home about. But yeah, overall, I really did enjoy Spire of Stars. So, where do I want to rank it? I think for Spire of Stars, I would put it in solid. Just a very fun raid, very mechanic heavy. Like, I think you would need 5 players to beat it because of the plates and how all that works. So there was like really no low mans of it. Again, I didn't really follow day 1 raid races or anything back then, so I can't really speak too much to that. I do know Redeem won it. But yeah, to me, just a solid raid. Even though it was a raid lair, so it's a little short, I always enjoyed running it. So yeah, we'll give it a solid. Alright, next is Scourge of the Past. So I actually did this one flawless, and my last clear was our flawless. That was right before sunsetting came into the game, and we're like, hey, we should do a flawless. So at the time when this came out, I didn't have a raid team, but this was my first day 1 I ever partook in. And we actually got to final boss, we just couldn't squeeze out damage. I feel like I was holding my own for sure. So that would have been cool if this was my first day 1. That being said, I went super hard. We didn't get it done. The next day I hopped in there, beat it, and I got Anarchy on my first clear and like second full attempt. And I just felt it was sort of deserved because yeah, I really put in the time trying to beat it on that day 1 and we couldn't. Anarchy is an absolute beast of a weapon, as we all know. So yeah, definitely get some points there. For the loot, it had threat level, which if we look at that, that has trench barrel. So yeah, we also had random loot at this point. So here was the perk pools. Nothing amazing, but like surrounded grave robber's good, grave robber trench barrel. This was kind of the best weapon from the raid. You had tempered dynamo, which never really amounted to much. The no feeling scout rifle, which was the first scout rifle in the game with box breathing, and I believe it could 3-tap in PvP. So PvP people wanted that, had rapid hit. And then bellowing giant, I think it was still a cluster bomb meta back then. So it did have cluster bomb and field prep, so not a bad roll. But it was also void, which was the same as the gambit bad omens. So if you already had a good bad omens, you didn't really need a bellowing giant. As for the gear, it was this blacksmith type stuff because it came out in Season of the Forge. And it also had the always on time exotic sparrow, which still to this day is the best sparrow. Even though they have, what's the word I'm looking for? Like made speed the same across all sparrows. Always on time is still the best because it has that like intrinsic perk where you take less damage or enemies are less accurate when shooting at you, but it also has more side boost, and a lot of people don't realize that, but I definitely do because I'm so used to running it because I've been using it for like 5 years that if I throw on another sparrow, it just feels different and you have less side boost. So still the best one in the game. But yeah, decent loot pool, decent armor, but nothing crazy, but definitely the best exotic sparrow. Also this sparrow would only drop from the servitor encounter. So speaking of the encounters, you had that opening area in the city where you had to run around and take out the berserkers. And that was just really cool. And they did bring the berserkers back in Salvation's Edge, the final shape, which was really cool because those were really unique. It was really cool that they put a unique enemy type just in a raid. I really liked that. Then after that, you had a little traversal. You had the servitor encounter, which was super neat and actually quite a challenge. And that secret chest was the only place you could get always on time. And then you went to the boss room. You had kind of like a setup thing to get to the boss with like the tanks and whatever. And then you had the final boss encounter. So yeah, also cool that they incorporated tanks into the raid. And then the final boss I thought was really cool. The Vandal snipers were a threat back then, but it was fun to just kind of roam the rooftops and take them out while you had people doing the mechanics, or I would do the mechanics. But yeah, I just really liked the mechanics in that raid. I thought they were really fun. Damage phase was really fun to get like those one phase bakes with like Darcy, or yeah, just whatever you needed to do to optimize a one phase was really fun. And yeah, I just have nothing but super fond memories of this one. So for me, it's S tier. I wish I could run it to this day. It's a nice quick raid. It's like I said, it's just super enjoyable for me to run. So yeah, S tier for me, amazing. So we're going to do Last Wish next. I have 55 clears, and yeah, Last Wish it's an all-timer for a contest day raid race, even though contest didn't exist back then. But yeah, it was an absolutely epic raid. You had Datto missing day 1 by 2 minutes. Only 2 teams cleared in the first 24 hours. It was all light level based back then, no contest mode. Yeah, just a super unique and novel experience. The loot table was the Great Hunt set, and I think it looks really good. I think it's very nice on Hunter. I've always liked the Hunter arms big time. And yeah, the weapons, I mean, it's been reprised now, but even at the time, Nation of Beasts was super good. Transfiguration could roll Rampage and Kill Clip, which was very unique. Age-Old Bond had 4 times a charm, I believe, at the time, and that was a unique roll for the time. Apex Predator, which was a crappy rocket again at the time, but then when it was re-released, it was completely meta. Supremacy, same thing kind of goes for that, but even back in the day, it had snapshot sights and was like really good in PvP. Techian Force was never too amazing. Tyranny of Heaven had some decent rolls, and then Chattering Bone as well. A lot of people liked. It was kind of a pulse rifle meta back then. But yeah, huge loot table. You also had the 1000 Voices, which was super cool. Still a very unique and neat weapon to this day. I wish they would just give it a catalyst and give it particle deconstruction. I think that would be super, super awesome. But yeah, loot table, very, very good. The raid itself, amazing. You had the opening, you have Callie, pretty much a meme now. She's been soloed lots, but at the time, a really unique fight. And then you would go into Shirochi, which again, also just a super, super unique fight. Morgoth, back before he would just fall over, was also a very unique fight. Then you had Vault, which was like probably the hardest raid puzzle we'd ever seen in Destiny at that point in time. So that was very, very cool. And then you had Riven, which if you've never done Riven legit and you're a raider, please do Riven legit. It's one of the most unique experiences you'll ever have. They made you do Riven legit in Pantheon, which I thought was great. But yeah, if you've never done Riven legit, you owe it to yourself too. Just an awesome, awesome encounter. And then you still had the Queen's Walk after all that. So probably, yeah, by encounter amount, it's the biggest raid we've ever had. It's on the Dreaming City, which I'm a sucker for the Dreaming City. I love the aesthetic. So this one is an obvious, amazing S tier for me. I just think it's so good in so many ways. I can't glaze Last Wish enough. I love that it's 4 boss fights. I'm a big boss fight guy, not so much a puzzle guy. So yeah, Last Wish for me is up there in S tier for sure. Definitely amazing. Oh, and one funny thing with Last Wish is I had actually saved a whole bunch of ethereal keys so that I could power level in the next season. So I actually got Anarchy before I ever got 1k voices, because I had banked like 25 of the boss keys. And then that next season, I was able to power level like crazy. And then one of those had given me 1k voices. So yeah, 1k is the longest it's ever taken me to get a raid exotic as well. And it's one of those raids where if it's some buddies and I know we all know what we're doing, it's always fun for me to hop back into that raid. I just think it's awesome. Next up, we have Crown of Sorrow, which is tied for my lowest clears. I only had 14, but it was my first one I ever beat week 1. So that was back in Season of Opulence, when the Menagerie was around, which was a wonderful season. And Crown of Sorrow, I think, dropped day 1, and I went super hard on leveling, and I hopped in with a team day 1, and we did get to the boss. So that made me feel really good, and I wasn't even really struggling. I was on a hunter, and I remember using Jotun on those wizards before boss, and I had my area on lockdown. Like, I absolutely loved I felt like that's when it clicked, and I was actually finally getting good at Destiny 2. Because, yeah, I was definitely not the problem on that day 1 LFG. So, anyways, we did get to boss. We didn't beat it, but I still did beat it week 1. So that was very exciting for me. I was still in the era of always having an LFG raids, which is probably why I only have 14 clears. And why, at the time, I didn't really like Crown of Sorrow so much, because of just the randomness of the people that you get on LFG. And this one did have mechanics that did require you to be pretty on point and like in sync with your teammates, especially the person you were like on a team with. So the opening encounter was kind of cool, but a little long, kind of dragged on. But yeah, I remember on day 1, I was using Sleeper Simulant to melt those ogres, and it was working great. Then you had like a jumping puzzle, and then you get to the boss room. And then in the boss room, it was actually 2 different bosses that you'd fight. So boss room is really cool. It was split up into 3 areas, and then yeah, you had to like break these crystals and stuff. And then the first boss you fought was Galron's Deception, and like how you activated damage and that whole damage phase was just super cool. You needed a buff, and then you'd punch him, and then you could do damage, but nobody else could. And then 2 people could do damage because the next guy would punch him, and so on and so forth. I honestly think it's one of the most unique boss fights that we've ever had in Destiny. And then the last boss was Galron the Sorrowbearer. And this one too was a pretty fun and unique and interesting fight. This was back in the auto-loading meta days. So people were like 2-manning it with Tractor Cannon, actually did 50% more damage with Void weapons. And then there was an Iron Banner grenade launcher, Swarm of the Raven, and Spike Nades on it. And I think mine even had Field Prep. So anyways, that was the meta. And then also Outbreak Perfected was the meta for him. So yeah, anyways, just a really cool fight. Pretty big fan of that raid in hindsight and after I ran it with my friends. Like I said, the coordination with LFGs was sometimes a little annoying, but yeah, once I ran it with my friends, I thought it was really, really fun. So I'm going to put it in great. I don't think it's quite amazing tier with only 3 encounters. And oh, I didn't talk about the loot pool, did I? So we had Galron's Right Hand, which had Demolitionist, which it came out in that season. So that was pretty good. Colisean Noblesse, I actually had a Disruption Break Shield Disorient roll, which I really, really liked. I thought it was awesome. Emperor's Courtesy, I had Grave Robber and Swashbuckler, which I would run with an Insurmountable Skullfort Titan. So I would do the Ballistic Slam, get a ton of super energy, and then I would also proc Swashbuckler ×5 and just melt stuff. It was goated for Gambit Prime. I was like super good at Gambit back in the day when it was like, I know that's a meme, like Gambit's a total meme, but like genuinely, I loved rocking that setup. It also rolled Surrounded, which was decent, and it had Opening Shot and Quick Draw or Snapshot, so really good PvP rolls. Plus, it actually has a super long weapon model, and that helps in PvP as well. So this thing was actually pretty goated in PvP. And then Bane of Sorrow, but like Hammerhead existed at this point, so it wasn't needed. And then you had the Shadow's Helm for the Titan and the Shadow's Mask for Hunter, which both looked really good. And yeah, just some like pretty all-around solid looking armor that I really like to this day. But yeah, I think it's deserving of the great tier. So next is Garden of Salvation. That one came out with Shadowkeep. It's Vex themed, and I've never been a huge Vex theme type guy. You've got the running encounter to start, and then you have the sort of the baseball diamond one where you have to like kind of run around an area that's sort of in the shape of a baseball diamond. So you got like 1, 2, 3, and 4, or however people want to do their callouts. Then you've got the Harpy boss, and then you've got the final boss. I do really like the aesthetic of this one, actually, like that Black Garden aesthetic. I think it's very cool. The scale of this one is wonderful. It's also probably the best place to learn well skating. And speaking of well skating, I learned the old well skating in Scourge of the Past with like Worldline 0. So just wanted to throw that in there because, again, I'm just talking about like my rankings and my memories that I have in these raids. And that was one thing I really liked doing in Scourge of the Past. But yeah, for Garden, the scale's great. The loot pool, again, it's been refreshed, but at the time, I think Prophet of Doom had like some decent PvP rolls, and I really liked Accrued Redemption. I had a random roll with Rangefinder and Rampage, and then Sacred Provenance was the 4-burst pulse rifle, and it could roll with Kill Clip, and people really liked that one. And then you had, Zealot's Reward, Ancient Gospel, Omniscient Eye, and Reckless Oracle. And they're all very, very good weapons now, once they were reprised and are craftable. But yeah, at the time, none of them were too crazy. Like I said, I remember using Accrued Redemption more than anything. But yeah, and then the armor, I don't think looked amazing for this raid either. So Garden of Salvation, honestly, when I think about it, like the mechanics on the final boss are cool with like the tether and building everything. But when the weapons were reprised and I was just having to run it with LFG, it hasn't aged well, I would say. It was super boring. I could do the whole raid with no comms. But I mean, that's partly due to like power creep and whatever else. But for me, I'm actually going to put Garden in mid. I did attempt the day 1 and I got very far. And another cool thing with Garden is it was my first ever flawless raid. I did it with randoms on LFG. And Shadowkeep is actually when I met like what became my best Destiny friends, and we created raid teams after that and all this. So yeah, I would go on to do all like the raid challenge triumphs with each other, Divinity was the raid exotic, which is a wonderful exotic still to this day. So yeah, and it was like S tier for a lot of years. But yeah, that's when I met my friends actually in an LFG. It was 5 members of a clan and then me, and I hit it off with them. Shout out Will and Baker and all you guys. And yeah, anyways, we just started playing together and just really enjoyed each other's company. They're great dudes. So yeah, I do like Garden for that. And like I said, it was my first flawless raid, so that was kind of neat too. Again, just proving like I'm good enough to be a decent player in this game. So I like it for all that. But again, if somebody just hit me up and, hey, want to run a Garden of Salvation, you'd have to twist my arm a lot more than if someone were to ask me to run a Scourge of the Past or even a Crown of Sorrow or something like that. So I'm going to keep Garden of Salvation in mid. Not saying it's a bad raid, I'm not crazy about it. And this is so funny. Now that I'm looking at my raid report, I see that Garden of Salvation, I have 81 clears. I guess that's artificially inflated because of the red border grind that I recently did. So then I was running it like once a week. But anyways, it is just funny that one, it's actually my highest cleared raid of any of the raids I've ever played. And like I just said, I just ranked it mid. So just kind of funny how that goes. But again, that was back in the day where you like would farm for random rolls. Again, before the loot refresh. So yeah, that definitely would have played a part. Next up, we have Stone Crypt. So my raid report shows a day 1. So this was technically my first day 1 according to raid report. But I don't have the emblem because I didn't beat every encounter. So I mentioned those guys that I met. This was our first like day 1 attempt with an actual sorta team, but we still needed 2 guys because we were all still on PlayStation at the time. So yeah, we only had like 4 of us. And yeah, we just couldn't get past A-Tracks. It was too big of a damage check. Yeah, our team wasn't fully set up. Like the guys I normally played with, I think were good, but the randoms we picked up, it just wasn't enough. I remember my girlfriend at the time, she was at a party and needed to be picked up, so we just kind of called it there. But then I got home, couldn't sleep, and I was like, fuck it. And all the other guys had went to bed. So then I found a different team, and they were on Final Boss, and we actually wound up beating it. So technically it was my first day 1, sort of, but I didn't beat every encounter, so not really. It was also my first trio. So again, I felt I was getting better at the time. So just through random LFG, I found a guy that was teaching a trio, and I was like, you know what? I kind of want to try some low mans. So I did that, and that was cool. I also did the flawless, and the flawless shader for this raid is exceptionally nice. It's one of my favorite shaders. I would show it, but maybe I will show it. Maybe I will go on to Destiny just to dig it out. But I don't know how these new shaders look, so it's hard for me to find. But yeah, I think the shader is beautiful. The armor is pretty neat from this raid, very unique. The whole aesthetic of the raid is kind of cool, I think. Trustee was a decent scout rifle. You had Posterity, the hand cannon. It was decent at the time. And then Eyes of Tomorrow was the raid exotic. And to this day, I know I got it really, really early as well. But to this day, I don't think ever really been a good exotic. I certainly don't like using it. But then this raid had some of the best weapons. And again, this was all before weapon crafting. You had Succession, which could roll with Reconstruction, which this is the raid that introduced Reconstruction to the game. Reconstruction Vorpal, I got the God roll super early on. And Beyond Light is actually when I started creating content as well. So yeah, I loved everything about Succession. It's one of my favorite weapons in the game. And then Heritage had Reconstruction Recombination, and Recombination was also super, super good. And we went through a slug meta, and it was excellent there. And then you had Commemoration, which could roll Reconstruction Killing Tally. And if you know anything about machine guns, their biggest downfall is having a reload, and that pretty much bypassed having a reload. So yeah, just 3 absolutely goated weapons. And then you also had Bequest, which was slept on for a lot of years until Crota came around, because it actually has the highest impact for sword stats of any sword in the game. Maybe outside of like Crown Splitter, but like for normal swords, So yeah, it's a super good DPS sword, especially as a legendary. So yeah, the loot table in this one was crazy. The encounters themselves, you had the opening with the blizzard and everything, and then you get to the terminals, and that one is a pretty unique fight, very cool. Then you have Atrax, which is also a super unique fight with the clones and the very short damage window. And then you have the dunking in the mines or whatever you're doing in that third encounter. Oh, plus you have Deepstone Lullaby from second encounter to third encounter. You go out into space, and then you have the final boss, which is Tanix for the millionth time. And even still, though, it's a pretty cool final boss fight. He just rolls over now. But I am going to put it in S tier as amazing, just because of a combination of, it was my first like real day one attempt, and I sort of got it done. It was my first trio. The loot pool is great. The vibes of it are great. Like I said, with the Deepstone Lullaby and just the unique encounters. I think they're very unique. And it's also a very quick raid to run, which I really like, and not too mechanic heavy, which I also like. So yeah, I just really like everything about Stone Crypt now that I'm thinking about it. And it's easy to just hop in with your friends, do a chill run, and get off. And yeah, so I'll put it in S tier. Next is the reprisal of Vault of Glass. Again, so we beat challenge day one. And I also trioed this with my buddies Pat and TJ. So this is when we kind of got split up. So with Stone Crypt, I did play that on PlayStation. But then I also had a PC. Like I said, I was making content. So I did the day one with my boys. But then I went to PC. And that's when I found my other friends, Pat and TJ. And then when crossplay came into the game, then we were a full team. But yeah, so Pat and TJ, we actually trioed Vogue, which was a really fun experience. This was back when I don't want to diminish Lowmans, but back before Witch Queen, survivability was quite tough in Lowmans because there was none of the resilience things that came along in Witch Queen, none of the resilience damage resistance. So yeah, I found the Vault of Glass trio really fun because you had to mix survivability with good damage output and juggling mechanics. Same with Stone Crypt. Once Witch Queen hit and Vow of the Disciple came out, you had 100 resil for all that damage resistance. And to me, that's when I stopped caring about Lowmans, because it totally, for the most part, it took survivability out of the equation. I loved, like I said, having to balance damage, survivability, and mechanics as a trio. But once that survivability went away, it just felt like, okay, all I would have to do is learn the mechanics. And also 3.0 subclasses came out after Witch Queen, so we just got power crept like crazy. So then I had no desire to run trios. But yeah, so Vault of Glass, that day one was quite a challenge for us. We had one player that wasn't quite up to snuff, and I think he then quit, and then we beat it shortly thereafter. The armor sets are decent, I guess. I don't really use any of them, and this is the only raid where I don't have every armor set for every character. I'm missing the Hunter Cloak, but that's totally fine because they reprised it actually in episode Heresy, but that's when I was sort of done with Destiny, and so I didn't get any of the red borders. But at the time, Vision of Confluence, I liked, before they reprised it with the red borders and whatever, I liked Vision of Confluence, and I actually had a Demolitionist Thresh roll corrective measure, and I really liked that. Found Verdict was always good for PvP, and Fatebringer, I had a time loss version with Osmosis and Explosive Payload, or Adrenaline Junkie, I want to say, and I really love that roll. So yeah, and then Praetus Revenge, I had a quick draw snapshot, I think it was. Something with no, it wasn't quick draw. It was snapshot opening shot, but it had perfect handling. And yeah, I kind of stopped sniping in PvP, but that thing was sticky as hell. On controller, it was so sticky. And then Vex Mythoclast, of course, was the raid exotic, which is very neat. And yeah, so the loot pool now, they're all like super meta. Hez and Vengeance is like the best rocket in the game. Corrective Measure has insane rolls for a machine gun. Like I said, they power crept the hell out of those ones. So the loot pool now is very, very good. On to the encounters. It is the same as D1. So I find the first half of the raid is just very slow going, like opening the gate and just basically up to Templar is kind of boring. And then you have Gatekeepers, which I find fun, and then Atheon, which I find fun, and I love that he takes more ability damage, because I would love watching low mans of people just melt him with Verity's Brow solar grenades. Sorry, not solar grenades, fusion grenades. So that aspect is kind of cool. But overall, for Vault of Glass, because it was the first raid ever, there's a lot of nostalgia for that. But for me to run that raid, it's just kind of meh. I don't love running it, but I don't hate running it. It was super revolutionary for its time, arguably saved Destiny 1. I love that people can actually solo the raid, which is insane. But I'm going to put it in the solid tier. I think it's just a very solid raid. It's got good encounters, good loot pool. Well, cracked loot pool now. But just like everything about it is very, very solid. It stands the test of time. But obviously they've iterated on how many raids over the years. So they've all gotten better over time. Or for the most part, they've tried different things is what I'm saying. But like I said, it still holds up to this day. I think it just misses on the great tier, but it's definitely a solid raid. I definitely think it's good. Vow of the Disciple. So I recently made a video talking about the bugs in the Day 1 Desert Perpetual. And in that video, I said that I didn't beat it Day 1. But because no contest existed at that time, so they basically extended Day 1, I guess I have the Day 1 raid emblem on my raid report, but I don't think we actually beat it in the first 24 hours. I think we went to sleep, we got up, and we smoked Ralk on like our first or second try. I think they announced that they were extending it, and then we're like, okay boys, let's get some sleep. It was something like that. But we did beat it on what is essentially known as contest mode now. We also did the Flawless. I have 33 clears of this one. The loot pool, let's talk about it. You have Submission, which actually has some really good rolls for an SMG. Deliverance, Demolitionist Chill Clip, great. Insidious, lots of really good rolls there. I know I have a really good Adept Insidious. And then you have Lubre's Ruin, which is a pretty solid glaive. Forbearance. So yeah, shortly after Witch Queen came out, I got a Forbearance with Chain Reaction. And I remember making a video saying like, this is my new favorite loadout. And I can't remember what my primary was, but I used Forbearance and Parasite like crazy, and it went super hard. And then you had Cataclysmic with Bait and Switch. And a lot of people may not remember this, but I did a video on the perk Bait and Switch, and I talked about why it's so good because I'm a solo player. And yeah, I loved that. It's one of few perks that you could proc just on your own at will. And at the time, though, I think it was only a 20% damage buff. I could go back and watch my video. But I told people, I was like, yo, Bait and Switch, don't sleep on it. Like, it's so good because you just have to deal damage with your other two weapons. And then you're pumping out 20% extra damage. And then I guess they thought it was a little underbaked. So they took it up to 35%. And then they had to nerf it back down to 30%. So there's a little Bait and Switch history lesson for you. But yeah, this raid, the very first encounter when you come into it, the bog or whatever it is, not fun. Takes way too long. Total buzzkill, snooze fest. But if you get a first encounter raid checkpoint, which I think is what we wound up doing because we would farm it every week because that was when red borders came out. So we would like get our chests, switch characters, get that first CP, and then we would go and do it on our 3 characters. So yeah, that opening encounter is really crappy, but then after this raid, I just think is excellent. The first encounter is super cool, and then the traversals in this one and some of the skyboxes. That one skybox where you're looking down on whatever that big rectangular thing is has been my desktop background on my laptop since I got my laptop. I just think it looks so friggin' cool. And then you have Caretaker, which is a super unique boss fight, I feel like. I just love how it's designed. I think it's very, very good. Then you have third encounter, which I'm a huge lover. So again, this came out, only Void 3.0 was out. So Solar was still in the 2.0 version, and you could run Bottom Tree Dawnblade, which would extend your Dawnblade. So it was actually really, really good in that encounter because it was just super ad dense. And yeah, so you could use that. Or I was using Storm Dancer's Brace with Tickle Fingers, like the Arc Lightning Super on Warlock. And that was really good because you'd get half your super back, and then you could just be chaining supers. Yeah, I love the teamwork and the coordination in that, how you're like climbing level over level. And then you have the final boss, which is Rulk. Rulk was our first boss that ever really fought back. And honestly, such a good fight. The Pantheon version, even cooler. So yeah, for me, Vow of the Disciple truly might be my favorite raid. Maybe what I'll do when this is all done is kind of shift them around in the order that I would put them in, because I think that would be fun. And yeah, Vow is like super up there. I think it's amazing. I hate that the initial opening part of the raid is so slow and boring, but after that, every encounter hits. I think it's wonderful. And yeah, the armor set, like I said, it's kind of out there for me, but I do like the Titan chest piece. And then it had some of the best loot that you could get at the time. So yeah, just an awesome raid. All right, next we have King's Fall. Again, we did challenge day 1, and that War Priest challenge was a bitch. And then we also did the Flawless on this one. I have 26 total clears, so not a lot, but not bad. The armor sets, I really, really like. Yeah, I think they're super cool. The Warlock Bond in particular, I use like all the time. The Hunter chest piece I quite like. So yeah, it's got some cool stuff. Defiance of Yasmin was goated for PvP players. Quillam's Terminus never really caught on, but it is a good machine gun. Smiter Moraine, just a solid pulse rifle, but nothing amazing. Doom of Kelkis, one of the best scout rifles in the game because it could roll... Alright, I looked it up. It's Explosive Payload and Frenzy, so kind of 2 damage perks. It could also roll Vorpal Frenzy. But yeah, it just has really, really good perks. And then what else did we have from that one? Oh, Zali's Bane, which is like the best legendary hand cannon in the game. Maybe there's some better ones now, but yeah, that was my favorite for years after King's Fall came out. And then Touch of Malice was the raid exotic. A very cool and unique weapon, but was never really meta. On to the encounters. This is what makes this raid so friggin' good. So you have the entrance where you have to like dunk the balls and everything into the statues, which is pretty cool. Then you have the super long ships part, which is just iconic. It really gives you a sense of scale, which is awesome. It's also wicked to watch speedrunners just rip through that stuff. You then have totems, which is a fun little sort of relay race encounter. And then you're straight into your first boss fight in War Priest, which, like I said, on challenge mode was extremely difficult, but I've always just thought War Priest is a super cool encounter. Then you have a maze, which has a secret chest and all the thrall, and you got to figure your way through it. Golgoroth, which is just such a wicked encounter. You got the gaze holders, and then yeah, just the coordination, breaking the little sack to do damage. I just think it's a brilliant raid encounter. Then you have another jumping puzzle with the dick wall, and then you're onto the sisters, and then finally you have Oryx. And Oryx, yeah, like that boss animation when he comes up out of the, I can't really say floor. I guess it's kind of he comes out of the floor. Anyways, it's just all so cool. I love this raid. I love the hive. Yeah, and going over through the encounters and the fact there's like 2 really long jumping puzzle parts. It might be a bigger raid than Last Wish. I don't know how you'd really compare it, but either way, the scale of this one is just crazy. It holds up so well. For me, it's just an easy S tier. I've always said it's my favorite raid in the game. We'll see if I hold true to that when I do my final rankings at the end of this, but it definitely goes in the amazing category, 100%. Just an incredible raid. All right, next we have Root of Nightmares. Let's talk about the weapons first. We have Rufus's Fury, which is a decent auto rifle. I actually used it in my solo flawless clear for Sundered Doctrine. Caraxus's Distress, which has like a enhanced surrounded roll, which is really good for certain situations. Mikkel's Reverence, Briar's Contempt. Again, Briar's was like decent in certain surrounded situations. Nessa's Oblation, and then Conditional Finality. So they're all like good situational weapons and they look very cool, but none of them were really ever like super meta. And then Conditional Finality, same thing. Wonderful gun, but it was never like meta. I guess it was in like trials. I used it for a long time in trials, but not in PvE too much. But super fun weapon, don't get me wrong. And then very unique looking raid armor, which is also quite cool. For the encounters though, it was the first raid to ever be solo flawless. The first encounter is just connect the dots. The second encounter is connect the dots but jump across to do it. The third encounter is the planet's boss. And then finally you have Nezarek, the final god of pain. And yeah, there's some good jumping puzzles through there as well, especially the one going to planets. And I do want to say the transition from second to third is quite cool with all the shooting the seeds. And I know there's like some lore to where you can like look up and you see, I don't know, you'd have to talk to Bife about that, but apparently it's kind of some neat stuff. I will say the environment is very, very nice in this raid. I do like that. And then anyways, once you do a bunch of traversal sections, you get to Nezarek, the final god of pain, and that fight is also just kind of boring to me. So yeah, I'm just not a huge fan of Root of Nightmares. The day one was piss easy, but I do shudder to put it in the ass category, just because I don't know if there's any raids in the game that are truly like shit, but Root of Nightmares may be my least favorite one. Alright, so next we have Crota's End. Again, reprisal from D1. That being said, the reprised armor they brought back does look really, really good, so points for that. The weapons, when they came back, are actually all super, super good. Swordbreaker has really good rolls. Abyss Defiance, probably the worst one. High Impact Auto Rifle. Oversoul Edict has some really good rolls. Song of Your Ute is an absolutely meta machine gun. Fang of Your Ute is a monster in Trials if you know what you're doing, or like PvP in general. And then Word of Crota is an absolute beast in PvE as well. So yeah, really good loot pool. You start with the Abyss, which is very, very cool, but the challenge for Abyss was an absolute nightmare. I think it took us like 2 to 3 hours to beat. It was tough. Bridge, I've always found super boring. When we did the day one, I clutched up our clear on Bridge because I was the last guy over there and I almost died, but I was on my love Void Devour Warlock with Controverse, and I got a kill, proc Devour, gave me my health back, and then we got her done. So that being said, I do find Bridge very, very boring. It's just long and boring. Then we go through like entering Crota's chamber or whatever, and first we have to beat Ear Ute, which I think is a pretty fun and unique encounter. And then we take on Crota, the son of Oryx. This is another sort of Vow of the Disciple situation. If I could just hop in and do the 2 boss fights, I would like this raid a lot more. But then that's only 2 encounters at the same time. But yeah, I like the boss fights in this. I do not like the rest of it. Even though like the Abyss is kind of cool, I do just find it tedious on repeat run-throughs. So I am just going to give it a solid. Do I take that much off? Yeah, I think Crota's End is just solid. It's not terrible by any means, but I don't think it gets into that great or amazing category. Oh, and I didn't talk about it with Crota, but Necrochasm is the raid exotic from that, and it's actually a really, really good and fun auto rifle. So next we have Salvation's Edge, the Fight Against the Witness, the Final Shape raid. Very high stakes, very, very cool. Let's talk about the armor. It looks beautiful. I love the Titan set especially, but very cool, very unique armor. The weapons, really good. Critical Anomaly, the Stasis Sniper Rifle with Chill Clip quickly became one of my favorites. Non-denouement, could roll with Volt Shot on a bow, which is insane. Nullify, excellent 2-burst pulse rifle. Summum Bonum, very unique sword. Forthcoming Deviance, tons of great rolls for a glaive. And then Imminence, the SMG, also very, very good. And then you have the special linear fusion rifle, which is Strand in Euphony, which also very, very good in the right scenarios. So yeah, you just have a really, really good loot pool from the armor to the weapons. As far as the encounters, lots of big transitions, which again, I'm not the hugest fan of, but it does set scale. You have the opening encounter, which I think is called like Substratum, something like that. Just activating the plates and stuff like that. I think it's a really cool encounter. Herald of Finality, very, very good. Just a super cool boss fight. Again, you're like doing the plate mechanic. But yeah, I remember on day one, this one was a nightmare with those like the stasis guys that spawn in, those little, they're basically mini subjugators. That was really tough. The yellow bars that would spawn in, they're really tough. Just, it was a tough ass day one clear, but we got it done. And then you transition to the third encounter. Again, big transition. Then you have Repository, which is, yeah, like shooting the shapes and stuff on all those things and doing the plates some more and transitioning room to room. Sort of similar in Vow of the Disciple to its third encounter, where you're really on the go and on the move a lot, which I quite like, though I like it more in Vow than in this raid. Then you have Verity. So I was very lucky that I had a set raid team that we'd run this all the time. But Verity with LFGs would be an absolute nightmare, because even with our players, just like switching characters, you sometimes didn't know who was who, but we all know each other and stuff. So I don't know, just comms wise, I could just see this being a nightmare for LFGs. Verity is a super cool encounter, and once you know what to do, it's definitely all right. Like day one, it was completely obnoxious because there's very little feedback, but on subsequent runs, it's not bad. And then you have, of course, the Witness, which is also a very cool fight. Lots of hands going on, all that stuff. So here's the thing. I think Salvation's Edge is a very, very good raid, but its scale with all the long transitions and everything, and just with how much, with the red borders and everything, and how I was always having to get on every, it's not good for quick repeat run throughs. So like I said, Scourge of the Past, you can just hop in and be done in like 25 minutes. Real chill. Salvation's Edge, to run 3 times a week on all your characters to get all your red borders. And again, you don't have to do that, but that is just how Destiny players are, and that's how me and my clan were, that I would run with every week. I sort of then grew to resent it for having to hop in every week to do what felt like Destiny chores. And yeah, so that's what I didn't like about it, because it wasn't quick to just rip through. And that's no fault of Salvation's Edge. It's just how I grew to play it. So I'm going to put it in great. I do think it is a great raid, but for me, it's not in the amazing category because I just don't love it like that. I don't like hopping in to run it. I still find Verity too convoluted and annoying to run. It's one of those raids where you really have to focus for, and sometimes I just want to shut my brain off and chat with my friends. That's why something like Scourge of the Past or Deep Stone Crypt is in my amazing category. Even Vow of the Disciple, it's not super intensive. King's Fall is just so damn good, and like the nostalgia I have for it is so great. That's why it's up there. But yeah, I think I got to put Salvation's Edge in the great category. Which brings us to the latest one in Desert Perpetual. I'm not even going to talk about it a whole lot because I didn't buy Edge of Fate. I've never played it, so how can I judge? But I will say, if I were still playing, I think I would put it in the amazing category simply because it is 4 boss fights, and I've heard the mechanics are like fun, but they're not super tricky or difficult or anything. So I think it would be really just fun to hop in and roast some bosses. You can choose any order, which I think is great, sort of similar vein to the Leviathan, which I really like. So that's cool. I think the Lowmans for this one and the speed runs will be really cool because of that. I like the aesthetic. Again, I'm not a huge Vex guy, but that Vex final boss is cool as hell. So I like that. I just think it's a really, really cool raid. The traversal looks crazy. The weapons, you can get a crossbow. Again, I'm not going to dive into the weapons because I don't even know like new weapon perks. I'm not like in the game like that anymore. Obviously, I have no nostalgia for it because I'm never going to play it unless I get Edge of Fate for free somehow and my friends want to do one day. But yeah, anyways, I do think it is a very cool raid, but I can't put it in the rankings. But I do think Bungie cooked with it outside of the bugs and all that, and we can have those separate discussions. But just as a raid, I think it looks awesome. And just knowing how I am and how I tend to not like mechanics and puzzles, but I do like boss fights, that one looks tailor-made for me. So to my amazement, there's now 15 raids in Destiny, or Destiny 2, which is crazy. But again, I'm going to leave Desert Perpetual off the list. So now let's do a final ranking. So I have said for years that King's Fall is my favorite, and I stand by that. I think it's wonderful. After doing this and giving all my reasoning, I'm actually really glad I did this one off the cuff and not scripted, because it really made me like just say gut feeling, how am I feeling about this? Like in the moment and like after talking about it a little bit. So I think it is like my true rankings. So I would put Vow of the Disciple next. I would then put Scourge of the Past just because I think it's such a cool raid and I love running it, and it's just, I just think Scourge of the Past is awesome. Then I would go Last Wish. The scale of it, the boss fights, just so much about Last Wish is so iconic. It's excellent. Then I would actually go Leviathan, and then I would go Deep Stone Crypt. Then I would keep Crown of Sorrow where it is, and then keep Salvation's Edge. Again, that's just for the repeat run-throughs. I may actually think, on just a comparison basis, that Salvation's Edge is a better raid. Probably I would put it up here on just like quality of the raid. But for my personal take on how much I like running it, I think right here is where it should be. I would way sooner run any of these ones before Salvation's Edge. And then we get down to Spire of Stars, Vaulted Glass, Crota's End. So again, if I was just going on like which one I like the most and which I'd want to run the most, it would probably go Crota, and then it would go Vaulted Glass, and then Spire of Stars. And then for the mid ones, definitely Eater of Worlds is the first I would want to run in the mid. I don't think it's that bad. I just think it's like pretty short and easy. Garden of Salvation, Root of Nightmares, take your pick. I think I would keep the order the same. I think probably if you had to ask me what my least favorite raid in Destiny is, it would be Root of Nightmares, and my most favorite raid would be King's Fall. So yeah, I'm actually so glad I decided to do this, because it was really fun to kind of go down memory lane and yeah, just think about all these raids that I've run dozens and dozens and dozens of times and put them against each other and see how much I like them. So again, I'm not saying that order is what raids are the best, because Salvation's Edge could easily be up there. This is my personal take on how I feel about the raids and how I was feeling back in the day, like when I ran them. So that's it for the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I honestly really enjoyed making it. Like I said, I wasn't even going to really make one because I was never a big raiding YouTuber. I was all like solo content for dungeons and GMs and yeah. But I am glad I did, because I mean I have, let's just have a look, 528 total raid clears. So I have done a lot of raids. I guess that does include 7 Pantheons, and to talk about Pantheon really quick, I loved Pantheon, as did pretty much the whole community, I think. I think it was super cool. I loved the twists that they did on the raids. I hope they do a Pantheon 2.0 in the future for the people that love raids and stuff like that. But yeah, like I said, that's my list. that's going to be it for the video. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.